In a world filled with noise and uncertainty, tune into the voice of reason with Chaplain Ingrid Gentles every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us for uplifting conversations, inspiring stories, and biblical insights that will empower you to navigate life challenges with faith and confidence, where faith meets reality. Join the conversation on HGG Radio, live on YouTube, and social media. Don't miss it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. You are tuned into the Voice of Reason on HGG Radio Station, Higher Ground Gospel Station. My name is Chaplain Ingrid Gentles, and I am your host for today. Today's topic is called Truth and Consequence. Truth and Consequence. I was involved in a recent discussion about the consequences of one's truth and perception a few weeks ago, and I thought it would be fitting to have this discussion today. Do you know that your desire to be right based on your perception and your truth can have consequences in your marriage or relationships? Yes, it can. There's a game I used to play when I was younger. I won't date myself, but we called it back then the telephone. Today maybe be called something else. It's called the telephone, if I remember correctly, when I was in Girls Guides. This is how it works. A group of people come together. It doesn't matter how many, maybe 10, 20, 30, depends on the size of the amount of people that's present in the room. They would form a circle, whether they're standing, sitting on chairs, or sitting on the ground. It doesn't really matter, but they're in a circle. And how this game works is the first person who is identified to start will turn to the person to their right and whisper something in their ears, a sentence or something. They're telling them a short story or something. When that's done, the other person now has to turn to the person on their right and do the same thing. And you go on and on and on and on and on and on until the circle is completed. What I find interesting with this game is that by this time the message, once the circle is completed and the last person is now required to stand up and say out loud what they heard, by that time the message is completely distorted and twisted. And in some cases, it sounds absolutely nothing like what the first person said. That was a game we used to play in Girls Guide. And just even from a child, we can learn that, even what we speak and what we're passing on, when we're passing on information, somewhere along the line, there is a loss between when you're passing things on. There's a loss of information that occurs. It gets watered down each time it goes further and further and further. And so I just thought it would be fitting to bring this game into the conversation, because we're going to go now to the gospel. For those of you who are familiar with the gospel written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you will notice that there appears to be discrepancies about the same story or event being told or retold. There are variances in their stories, right? When they're retelling the same story or event that, Matthew witnessed or John witnessed, right? There's variances in when they're retelling the story. For example, the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 is recounted in all the four gospels. And let me just give you a brief synopsis of what that looks like. In the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus was moved with compassion for the large crowd and instructed his disciples to feed them. right? Jesus was moved, and the disciples found 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish, and initially they thought, this can't feed a multitude of people, which makes sense. There's not enough food to feed the amount of people that's present. But Jesus miraculously multiplied the food, feeding 5,000 men, women, children, and having 12 baskets of food remaining. Isn't that a wonderful miracle? Let's discuss the different recount of the same story. Matthew's recount, Matthew 14:13-21. This is Matthew's recount. Listen very carefully. The disciples came to Jesus and said, "This is a remote place and it's getting dark. Send the crowd away so they can go to the village and buy themselves some food to eat." According to Matthew, Jesus replied, "They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat." According to Matthew, then Jesus directed the people to sit down on the grass before they were fed. Taking 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and looking up to the heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave the food to the people. That is Matthew's recount of what took place. Interesting, right? Let's look at John's recount. When Jesus looked up and saw a great multitude coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" This is John's recount. Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? This is John's recount of what Peter is saying, what Jesus is saying to Philip. Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. Then John went on to say, "Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated, and they ate as much as they wanted." John is now saying Jesus was the one doing the distributing and giving out the food and feeding the people. And he did the same with the fish. I'm going to stop here for a moment. You are listening to the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Chaplain Ingrid Gentles. Our topic today is Truth and Consequences. HGG radio station, Higher Ground Gospel Station. If you like the topic and the conversation that's being had here, please click on the like button below, or better yet, why not subscribe to the HGG radio station family? We would absolutely love to have you. Let's continue. So we can see the different recounts from John's and Matthew's recollection alone, right? We can see the different recounts just from those two alone. I haven't even done Matthew, Mark and Luke, right? And so we can see that the recounts from John and Matthew's recollection is different. Same, the details were off, right? I use this example to say this, to make a serious point. I'm using this example. People's perception varies from one person to the other. There are many reasons for that. Let's look at some of the reasons why people's perception varies from one person to the next. Differences in people's personal experiences. Yes, your experiences can affect your perception of a matter, how you view something, because you have had an experience that may have triggered something for you to now see things and receive it in a different light. Am I making sense here? I hope I am. Keep with me. Let's go. Let's continue. The other reasons, cultural backgrounds, how you were raised, your background. Different cultures have different things in place, right? Your individual perspective, our individual perspective on things, our upbringing. That's another. Social environments that we are around, that we are in. Our education. Our emotions. Our biases. Influences our perception and how we perceive and interpret information. Our perception and view on a matter is our truth. Keep that in mind, right? Notice I didn't say it is the truth. It's your truth. So let me use one of these examples, for example, biases. I'm not sure if this was a good example, but I'm going to use it anyway. If your husband has friends that you particularly don't care for or don't like for whatever reasons, whether their background, their culture, whatever the reasons. And as believers, that shouldn't happen, but guess what? It does, right? Let's just be honest here, right? For whatever the reasons, you don't like your spouse's friends, and let me just say that they're hanging around with. Let me just use myself as an example. I don't like my spouse's friends that he's hanging around with. And so if my spouse says to me, oh, you know what, the boys and I are going out and we're going to hang out for a while, my perception of what he's saying to me is going to be skewed based on the fact that I already have a bias feeling towards his friends or some of his friends for whatever the reasons may be. And it may be valid reasons, right? But my perception and response to my husband, if he says, by the way, the boys and I are going out, or we're going to have a weekend trip, or we're going out for the evening, it's a boys' night out, my response based on my bias towards those individuals may not be right, and most likely will not be right. Right? And therefore, now I may have an attitude towards my spouse, towards my husband, and he can't understand why I'm behaving in a manner. Why can't he just go out and hang out with his friends? Why can't he go out and have fun just like, I can go out with my friends and so forth? And so he may be a bit disturbed as to why are you making such a big issue of this? These are my friends, right? That's bias. And when biases come into the picture, it distorts the conversation in a lot of ways, and it distorts the perception of actually what is being said and actually what's really happening. So I'm going to say this again. Our perception and view on a matter is our truth. Once again, I did not say it is the truth. Therefore, when we are interacting with each other, particularly in a marriage, also in other relationships, but I'm just focusing on a marriage right now. Remember, your spouse may have a different point of view or perception on a particular situation that may be causing a problem in the marriage, in your marriage. You need to be aware of that. You need to be really cognizant of that. What should be the right approach in an attempt to resolve a problem in your marriage or in your relationship? What should be the right approach given the fact, hopefully that you have come to, or at least one of you have come to an understanding that, everyone's perception is different. Everyone's, thought on a matter or what they see or what they heard, they may interpret it different based on many things that we discussed, by cultural background, social environment, biases, and so forth, right? So what should the right approach be in an attempt to resolve a problem in your marriage? Recognize that your spouse's perception is his or her truth. That's the first thing. Take the time to understand where they're coming from. That's maturity. That's maturity, right? And the Bible talks about maturing in the word. Believers have to mature. Even if you're an unbeliever, you need to mature. You need to grow. You need to evolve. You need to become better. You're understanding things that you used to do before you that was wrong. You should not be doing them now. Maturity is growing to a better place and a better place of who you are as a person, who God has called you to be, and what the word says. So as believers, it is imperative that we are maturing. And therefore, a mature person, listen to what I'm saying. I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, but a mature person, including my own toes, let me just put it out there. A mature person would take the time to recognize, let me try and understand where my husband or my wife is coming from. Let me try and understand what she's saying or he's saying to me, even though I'm not happy with what's happening here, because I am also affected. I am also hurt. Listen, let me listen. Listen to learn and not to react. Right? You want to listen to learn and not to react. When you are listening to someone and you are giving them your full attention, zip it. Because I am telling you, when you're listening and you're not speaking, you are hearing a lot of things that you probably would have missed if you were speaking and stopping the conversation, and not letting the conversation, interrupting the conversation and not letting the conversation flow between the two of you, right? So listen and learn, right? And once you're listening and you're hearing and you're learning what's being said, there may be an opportunity at that point to be empathetic to your spouse based on active listening and hearing them, hearing what he or she is actually saying to you. Be empathetic. It is difficult, to be empathetic when you yourself are feeling hurt, right? And now you have to humble yourself for the sake of the union, for the sake of the marriage. That requires self-control, right? You're controlling your feelings and your emotions, your perception, your rights, your truth for the sake of the marriage. The Bible talks a lot about self-control, right? Learning to control yourself is a great asset to you as a person, to you in all your relationships that you encounter, whether it's your marriage, whether it's at work, whether it's outside, whether it's, friends, whatever the situation is. Self-control, I am telling you, is extremely important when we're dealing with relationships. Give them grace. Be quick to forgive as fast as you can. Forgive. Think about this. If you have two people who are unforgiving, they will likely be having marital breakdowns, marital problems. Someone has to be mature enough to say, all right, I'm going to listen and try to understand where he or she is coming from, where my spouse is coming from. Someone has to be able to do that. Because if you can't do that, you cannot move on from the problem that you're facing. Right? And so the Bible talks a lot about forgiveness, and it talks a lot about grace, because God gives us that daily, constantly, not just daily, every second of the day, right? We're being given grace and forgiveness. And therefore, we are required to give grace and forgiveness to, in this case, our spouse and anyone in our relationship. I want to say something here to you. While it may feel great to be right, because let's face it, everyone wants to be right. You know what that's called? Pride. Pride. You want to be right, especially for those who always want to be right. That's a whole nother situation there. But you want to be right, right? There, you get a feeling of satisfaction. The flesh, not the spirit, not the spirit, man. The flesh gets a satisfaction of feeling I was right. And he has to see that, or she has to come to that place of seeing that I was right. While it's great to be right, right is not might. Humility is might. Remember that. Right is not might. Humility is might. Let prayer be an integral part of your marriage or your relationships. Pray about it. Pray over the situation, because a lot of times when we go into prayer, we get the answers that we need. How to respond. The Holy Spirit guides us and directs us as to how we should respond in a particular matter, or to a particular event, or to a particular situation, whatever the situation or crisis is that you're facing. Prayer is a great place also, point of reference to go to. Remember, you are a team, ladies and gentlemen, married couples, those who are engaged, getting ready to be married. We have to work as a team, right? Because a team should have a common goal together, a common goal. You can't have a common anything. You cannot be unified when I am right and you're right. The other person is right. What's going to happen? I'm right, you're right. What's going to happen? You know, when I started this conversation and I was thinking about it, I had so many flashbacks of things, and even still now, of things that I could have handled differently had I had the insight, the maturity, and the wisdom to do that. God has given us His Word, the Bible, His Word, right? Also, we have the Holy Spirit to guide us and to direct us and to instruct us. His Word also instructs us, guides us, and directs us. He has given us that for a reason. Because in His Word, there is wisdom, knowledge, understanding, right? We are being counseled by His Word through His Holy Spirit. We are required to grow. That's what God requires of His children. We have to grow. We cannot say, this is who I am, this is how I am, I'm not changing for anyone, take it or leave it. I've heard those kinds of conversations, and I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. But there are people with that mindset. This is how I am. This is me. Well, if this is how I am and this is me is your position, then I'm going to say to you, there is absolutely no opportunity for your marriage to grow and to thrive. There's no opportunity for your relationships to grow and to thrive because you are so self-focused on being right and this is me and have no other consideration for your spouse, others around you. How is that? I'm going to take a page from Benito Grange. So how's that working for you? How's that working for you? Really think about that. Reflect. How is that working for you? Oh my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope, I'm always hoping because hope is good to hope. I really hope that what I am sharing with you today will allow someone to self-reflect, to think about how they're approaching things in their relationship or in their marriage or outside of their marriage, other relationships between themselves, family members, whatever it is. Really take a step back and rethink, how am I showing up in this marriage? How am I showing up in these relationships? Am I showing up single? Or am I showing up in my marriage as united, a united front? Being in a united front means two people have to respect each other's differences. You may not like them. I'm sure a lot of us don't like things that our spouse, about our spouse and vice versa. That's quite normal. But we have to remember he or she have a different perception. Their truth is formed based on what they perceive and understand on a matter, based on their differences, background, cultural background, education level, biases. There's so many things that can impact how we perceive things. So, what I'm asking you to do, please give grace to each other, give grace to your spouse, and remember this conversation. If you are ever involved in a discussion that is causing a problem in your marriage, try to see it from the other person's perspective. That will be a great way to soften the conversation and the blow so that there could be further conversations to actually address and deal with the actual problem. Ladies and gentlemen, my time has come. I hope this was informative to you. Every time I talk about this, it's informative to me. And I tell you why I'm saying that. The flesh always wants to raise its ugly head to surpass the spirit. And so it is important for us to be reminded that we haven't yet arrived. We are still growing, right? And so we need to be reminded at times that we need to remind ourselves that the flesh is always surfacing. I pray that every marriages, relationships out there will take something away from this and utilize it to help build, strengthen, and grow together. Thank you for tuning into HGG Radio. Once again, my name is Chaplain Ingrid Gentles. You are listening to the Voice of Reason. I just want to pray a blessing over you. Take care. God bless. See you next time. Take care and bye-bye.
In a world filled with noise and uncertainty, tune into the Voice of Reason with Chaplain Ingrid Gentles every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us for uplifting conversations, inspiring stories, and biblical insights that will empower you to navigate life challenges with faith and confidence, where faith meets reality. Join the conversation.